I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Matthew Heineman, the director of the documentary Retrograde, as part of our Meet the Experts film documentary panel. First thing I wanted to ask is your main character in this movie, General Sadat. You say that he's hoping to return to Afghanistan and fight back against the Taliban, and is that still something that he is hoping to pursue?
Yes, I mean he's currently in exile, and I think that pursuit of taking back his country, forming armed resistance, is not something that happens overnight. It'll take months, if not years, if not decades. So that is something that he's currently embarking upon, but the timeline is very vague.
And obviously, you're not going to say anything about it here, so. Yeah. So as the withdrawal from Afghanistan took place amidst the chaos, I was curious as to, as someone who was on the ground watching it happen in real time, what surprised you the most about the execution of the withdrawal?
I think with most of my films, I wasn't there to sort of analyze who was at fault or what went wrong or how we got there. My goal with Retrograde was to try to take, again, as with all my films, to try to take this big amorphous subject, the war in Afghanistan, the end of the war in Afghanistan, and trying to humanize it, to try to put a human face to it. And that's certainly what I tried to do in that final chapter of the film at the airport, as thousands of civilians were desperately trying to flee. I'd never ever seen anything like it. I've filmed in lots of conflict zones in my career, and lots of dangerous situations and very emotional situations and very sad situations. Nothing remotely compared to the feeling of being at the Abbey Gate, which is one of the gates into the airport, as thousands of Afghan civilians were packed like sardines into a 4-foot deep sewage ditch. As 18-year-old Marines were making these impossible Sophie's choice decisions on who to let in and who not to let in, as the Taliban was watching at gunpoint 100 yards away, as ISIS was traveling around in suicide vests, waiting to attack, which happened 12 hours later in the very spot that I was filming in. And, I just had tears streaming down my face. I kept having to wipe the lens down, and all I could think about was, what have we done?
I mean, it's interesting you talk about how you're not looking to point fingers at anything, and I think you show that you do that pretty well, because right at the beginning you show all the different presidents of both parties that have that speaking on Afghanistan, showing that this is something that has gone on for so long.
Yeah, I mean the point of that opening was a multitude of reasons, but for one, it was just trying to show for the uninitiated, the time span through which this conflict has existed. It was a 20-year war, is the longest war in U.S. history, and the data point in which we enter the story, is this final chapter, but it preceded it for 2 decades. And yeah, I mean, I think our world is divided enough, our world is politicized enough. My goal was not to, again, sort of play into the politics of it all. I think we're inundated with that. And, I wanted to try to create a historical document that allowed people from both parties to be able to look back on this moment and learn. I mean, the term retrograde is a military term for leaving a war zone. It's obviously, in some ways an allegorical tale of something that's happened throughout history, and will continue to happen as we fight wars. And what can we learn from it?
So there are some amazingly tense sequences in the film. I think of the one where Sadat is in the car. I can't remember where he was going, but you hear the gunshots getting closer, and then and then everything just goes crazy. I'm curious, as for you and your crew, what was the most dangerous experience? Was that the most dangerous experience you and your crew had while filming, or was there another one that was even more perilous?
I'll first start by saying, I don't make these films because I enjoy being shot at, or for the danger of it all. It's not something that excites me. I don't get off on it. It's always about the story. It's always about the human beings at the center of the stories that I'm telling. It just so happens that I have been put in very dangerous situations, as you pointed out. In that car ride, to the front line as we were getting shot at. I was in a helicopter on a resupply mission at night as rockets were being shot at us. There's a scene at the end of the film when I'm with the general that we were following, and sniper bullets, flew over our heads. I have fear like everyone else has fear, and that fear affects me. It's had a profound impact on me, on my life. I suffer from PTSD. I have nightmares often. So these films take a lot out of you, and I think in those situations I have zero agency. I don't know how to shoot a gun. I don't know how to fly a helicopter. I don't know how to I don't know military tactics per se. So all I can do is focus on shooting. Focusing on framing, on aperture. On the sort of craft of filmmaking, and that's what I choose to focus on during those really intense moments, just to sort of calm down and center myself.
Getting back to the idea of the conflict in Afghanistan as from a macro perspective, and what do you think? Having been so intimately involved in that and being there. What do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of our 20-year involvement in Afghanistan?
Oof, I can't answer that question. I mean, I'm not a policy expert. I don't know much more than you do probably about the sort of history of the war in Afghanistan. That's not what I set out to do. That's not the film I made. I think I don't know. I mean, that's why I make these films is we're so inundated with headlines and stats and numbers of people lost and the amount of money spent. And I think what gets so lost in these conversations is the human beings at the center of it. And that's what I choose to focus on, for better or for worse. And I think what's also often lost in these conversations, are the civilians who are in war zones, the ones that are most affected, the ones that just want to live and have a family and go to school and have a job and have security. That's why those final moments, those final days at the airport were so devastating to see, because they knew what their fate was. They knew what would happen when the Taliban took over, despite the rhetoric that the Taliban was saying. We're now girls can't go to school, women can't go outside without their faces covered. We're back to where we were in 2001. And for what? It's very sad to see. And I think, I hope 100 people take 100 different things away from the film. One of them, at the very least, is that, when's the last time you had a conversation about Afghanistan? The war in Ukraine has really usurped so much of the oxygen in international news coverage, and I hope that the film, reinvigorates a conversation around, again, this longest war in U.S. history, but also the people that we left behind.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Thanks for having me.